Number 1.
The family of murdered Aberdeen taxi driver George Murdoch believe his killing was premeditated as they launched an appeal for new information almost 40 years after his death. George Dodd Murdoch, 58, was found dead beside his taxi in September 1983, with a cheese wire garrote lying nearby. He had been beaten and strangled. On the 38th anniversary of George's murder, a £20,000 reward was offered in the hunt for the killer. The cheese wire killer was picked up in George's taxi and reportedly asked to be taken from Aberdeen to Petterculter. George radioed into his control room at 8:35 p.m. that night, but around half an hour later 2 young boys witnessed George being attacked on Pitfiddle Station Road. The location was more than 4 miles short of his stated destination. His wallet and fares from the night were stolen, and the only trace ever found of the killer was a cheese wire used in the murder that was left at the scene. In an appeal on BBC Crime Watch, Alex described George, nicknamed Dodd, as an ordinary working man who was forced to become a taxi driver after being made redundant from a factory job. His wife Jessie often worried about him working the night shift. Alex said, "He said, oh Jess, if anyone tries to take my money etc. I'm going to give it to them. My uncle Dodd was just not a fighter, he was not a fighter." He added, Dodd was late, and Jessie had been anxious in terms of when she got to see her husband again. Then there was a knock at the door. The police were there, Alex said before being overcome by emotion. The family were then informed that George had been brutally murdered as a manhunt was launched when a police dog handler found him lying in a pool of blood with severe injuries to his head, face and neck. Alex said, "It was brutal, very brutal. Someone carrying a cheese wire with them. What kind of person would do that? They're not using it for their work. It is premeditated, it has to be. It takes a special, callous individual to go out with something like that." Unfortunately, of course, after death of daughter life, Jessie's changed remarkably. Her health went into decline, and she never ever spoke about Dodd's murder, but she never felt safe. She always thought that the killer was going to come back and harm her. Unfortunately, she went to her grave not knowing who his murderer was. At times it makes me angry, sad that she was able to see justice. George's family are still hopeful after all this time and hope their latest appeal for information might bring his killer to justice. In a direct appeal to anyone who might know anything, Alex said, "For the family, and also for those that have passed, you can't take something like that to your grave. I mean, even if it is a hunch, and it's a small piece of information, please share it. Small snippets of information from you might actually help us with small pieces of information from somebody else, and we're able to start joining the dots. Closure to a family is like gold dust. It is something you crave for and you need. We certainly do, even after 38 years. A lot of people might say cold case murder, who cares? The family care. We have always cared. We always will." Detective Inspector James Callender also appeared on the show. He said, "Regardless of how much time has passed, we continue to receive a positive response from members of the public from all around the world when we appeal for information about this senseless murder. Over the years we have received sporadic information about what may have happened to George, and this is always investigated. It is apparent that many people will still have information that may help us bring closure to his family, and it is hoped that today's national television appeal may be seen by those people. Stories are passed on, or people remember something that may have seemed insignificant to them at the time, but is actually vital for us. We are urging anyone who has not come forward previously, who believes they can assist the investigation, to contact 101.
Number 2.
The Lockerbie woman's murder has featured on national TV show Crime Watch Live as cops ramp up the hunt for her killer. Marion Hodge went missing almost 40 years ago, and although her body has never been found, she was declared dead in 1992 at Edinburgh's Court of Session. And police, who last week reopened the investigation into her case for a second time, declared it a murder probe in 2005. The television show is famous for jolting witnesses' memories, and new leads have brought convictions over the years. It was screened on Tuesday morning, and presenter Rav Wilding interviewed Detective Inspector Stephen McGrath by Zoom. Di McGrath is heading the investigation and said, "The response to our appeal so far has been positive, but we are continuing to ask the public to contact us if they have any information that might help. Marion's family and friends deserve closure. They have waited far too long. We're appealing to anyone who remembers anything unusual leading up to Marion's disappearance, any sightings in the White Sands area or any other relevant information that might help our inquiry." Marion is said to have been dropped off in the White Sands area of Dumfries around 7:30 a.m. on Friday, July 6, 1984. She was reported to be carrying a blue canvas suitcase and brown handbag, wearing a cream high-collared blouse, gray skirt and black sandals. 3 days later she was reported missing to Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary. The 34-year-old mother of two lived in Balgray, Lockerbie, and worked in the town's Clydesdale Bank. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall, of slim build with dark brown collar-length hair. Her disappearance was described by family as totally out of character, and Di McGrath added on the show that if she was ever unable to make her work then she would always call the bank. Marion was also said to be very family-orientated and that it was her son's 15th birthday the day she vanished. Di McGrath remarked she would not have missed his birthday. She failed to make contact with family after that, and when she failed to make contact after the Lockerbie disaster her family knew then she was dead. Police have also set up a direct link to dedicated teams probing the murder. The Major Incident Public Portal, MIP, is a website that gives the public access to a form so they can send information directly to dedicated teams based at the Scottish Crime Campus. It supplements the standard reporting methods, which include phoning Crime Stoppers anonymously or Police Scotland directly.
Number 3.
Police have made a breakthrough in their attempt to solve the murder of a banker assassinated on his doorstep after they appealed for information about 2 men seen with a handgun on a nearby beach a month before the killing. Alistair Wilson, 30, was shot dead 17 years ago at his home in Nairn, near Inverness, in what has become one of Scotland's most notorious mysteries. The father of 2, a middle-class bank manager, was handed an empty blue envelope with the word Paul written on it before he was shot 3 times. Detectives revealed on Monday that they had uncovered a new lead, with a witness describing seeing 2 men on Nairn's East Beach, only a short walk from Mr. Wilson's family home. They described 2 men, one in their 20s and the other aged between 40 and 60, with the younger man in possession of a handgun, in the month before the November 2004 murder. Mr. Wilson was shot with a small German-made pistol, which was later discovered in a drain by council workers, which police believe may have been brought to Britain shortly after the Second World War. In a separate development, police recently traveled to Canada to interview Andy Burnett, who was the landlord of a pub across the road from Mr. Wilson's home where his wife, Veronica, ran for help immediately after the shooting. Mr. Burnett was a friend of Mr. Wilson's and is seen as a key witness who is helping police with their investigation. Detective Superintendent Graham Mackey, of Police Scotland's major investigation team, said officers were seeking the public's help in identifying the 2 men who were seen on the beach. "We are following up this new information and I would ask anyone with information or who may be able to identify the men to please come forward and speak with us," he said. This potential sighting was passed to officers following recent publicity around the case, and I am grateful for the positive response we have received from the local community. As I have said recently, time is no barrier to justice. More than 17 years have passed since Alistair's murder, but Police Scotland is committed to bringing his killer to justice and providing the family with the answers they deserve. Following a recent review of witness accounts, further analysis of timings from the night in question and investigative developments, officers have also altered the description of the man they want to trace in connection with the murder. Detectives believe the man who shot Alistair on his doorstep to have been aged between 20 and 40 years old at the time. This would mean he is now aged in his mid-30s to almost 60 years old. He was approximately 5 feet 7 inches tall and was wearing a baseball cap and jacket. Previous appeals described the gunman as being between 30 and 40 years old. Mr. Mackey added, "Someone out there knows what happened to Alistair and developments in the investigation over the last few weeks are a vital reminder that it is never too late to come forward with information, no matter how small or insignificant you may think it is. Mr. Wilson's murder has baffled police who have struggled to uncover a motive for the crime. His killer asked for Mr. Wilson by name, and the pair had a conversation. The victim returned inside briefly with the envelope before returning to the doorstep where he was shot. A huge police investigation was launched after the killing, and while police have spoken to more than 14,000 people and taken around 3,500 statements.
Number 4.
2 people have been arrested by detectives investigating the murder of a mum 31 years ago. Just after 10 p.m. on August 24, 1991, Veronica Anderson took a phone call at her home. Whoever it was, and whatever they said, prompted her to leave the house in a hurry and get a neighbor to babysit her 7-year-old son. She drove her son to the neighbor's home saying she would be back in 10 minutes as she had an appointment. 5 hours later she was found in her Cortina car with her throat cut. In a statement today, Cheshire Constabulary said 2 people had been arrested. Detectives investigating the murder of Vera Anderson, which took place on 24 August 1991 in Penketh, Warrington, have arrested 2 people, a spokesperson said. Today, Wednesday 23 March, a 70-year-old man from Widnes and a 61-year-old woman from Warrington have been arrested on suspicion of murder. They both remain in custody, being questioned by detectives. Mother of 2, Veronica, known as Vera, left her home in Widnes at 10:10 p.m. on Saturday, August 24, 1991, after receiving the phone call. Shortly after 3 a.m. on Sunday, August 25, 1991, the 42-year-old was found dead in her car off Tannery Lane in Penketh, Warrington. It was parked set back from the road in what was at the time a Lover's Lane hideaway, a winding road of derelict buildings and open land. Popular with courting couples. The location was a mile from her Widnes home in Penketh, off the A580 East Lancashire Road. Vera had left her home in Hadfield Close at 10:10 p.m. on August 24 after receiving the phone call. Vera was slumped over the driving wheel. No murder weapon was ever found, but nearby was a single blood-stained Minette cotton glove and a length of sash cord. A murder investigation was subsequently launched by Cheshire Constabulary. However, despite exhaustive enquiries over the years, no one has ever been convicted in connection with her death. Last year, on the 30th anniversary of Vera's death, officers issued a new appeal for anyone who has any information about the case to come forward. Detective Inspector Adam Waller said at the time, Vera's family have been left devastated by her death and have had to live with what happened since 1991. The family have never received closure from Vera's death, and I would appeal to anyone with information to come forward. Someone must know what happened that day, and I would appeal to them to get in touch. We appreciate that 30 years is a long time ago, but the smallest detail may help us in bringing justice for Vera and her family. The murder was potentially linked to 2 others believed to have been committed by the same man, who was dubbed the East Lancs Ripper. The other 2 victims were vulnerable sex workers. Veronica, known as Vera, was a divorced mother of 2. The first victim was Linda Donaldson, whose naked and mutilated body was found behind a hedge in a farmer's field at Winnock Lane, Lowton, near Lee. The grim find was made on Tuesday, October 18, 1988. On the same day, a TV dramatization of the Jack the Ripper murders, which had taken place exactly 100 years previously, was screened. The 31-year-old victim had been repeatedly stabbed. Just over 2 years later, the detectives' fears of a second murder had been realized, and it was feared the same person was responsible. 2 children, fishing at Pennington Flash, Lee, spotted 5 plastic bin bags. Inside them was the dismembered body of Maria Christina Requena, 26, also a sex worker, from Manchester. The youngsters saw the bags floating in the 170-acre lake, less than 2 miles from where Linda's body had been discovered. Maria, a mother of 1, had vanished on New Year's Day 1991, and her remains were found less than a week later on January 6. The locations and the savagery of the murders meant they have always been linked, but the killer has never been identified.